Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello and welcome to the Special Needs Mom podcast. Today we have an interview style episode and our guest is Laura Ishmael. Laura is somebody who has become a friend of mine through this beautiful special needs community. And she's a mother to 2 children, to 2 little girls. And she'll, of course, tell you a little bit more about them in the episode. But I asked Laura to come on to the show because I wanted her to talk about her experience as a traveling mom. And even beyond that, she stepped into a new role for her, which is being a travel advisor. If that's not a term familiar to you, then don't you worry. We'll talk all about it in the episode. But I wanted her on here because I noticed when I was watching her share online, she shares all the different sides of travel and what that looks like for families like ours. And it, for me, really had me dipping into a little bit of dreaming that maybe I had stopped doing. And that's what I hope that you take away from this episode, that, you know, many of us, we don't anticipate that our life looks like it does now. We didn't anticipate. And many of us formerly liked traveling. And for a lot of good reasons, that's just not part of the picture anymore. I think Laura is perhaps a good person to help maybe kickstart some of that life coming back into the dreaming that needed to take a break, but now is ready to bloom. So we're going to talk about both practical and a little bit of tactical, but really about like her story as a mom and still challenges that they come across as they travel. But I think you're really going to love the conversation. I know you'll love Laura. And my hope is that, again, you walk away from this episode having the same maybe dream type thoughts come into your head, things that you hope you can do or you decide that you want to do after listening to this episode. And of course, reach out to Laura as a resource. She's thrilled to be there for you. And we'll, of course, put all of her information and contact information in the show notes. All right. With that, welcome, Laura. Well, good morning, Laura, and welcome to the Special Needs Mom podcast.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to hang out. I feel like this is a twofer because we are acquainted, you know, outside of the podcast world. And so it's fun. We get to hang out and I get to dive deeper in, you know, like all the things that I think are just really special about you and that you have to share with this community. So let's tell everybody a little bit more about who you are. And I'll share a quick funny coincidence as we get started. And that is, we met originally at a retreat, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are together.
Yeah. And that was the one in San Diego. Mm-hmm. Do I remember that correctly? Yep. Okay. That was fun. And so we met there. And then, I don't know, like a year or so later, maybe more, my neighbor, well, actually, my ex-neighbor, she moved away, reached out and was like, oh my gosh, you know Laura? And I was like, yeah. And it was like this random like connection because her husband works with your husband.
Yeah.
And so I was like, this is now a really good little trio. And so we've since hung out as a trio and we're going to get another in the books. And so that's a really fun, like evolution of a friendship kind of
yeah.
story. So
special needs world is small.
It is, right? Yeah, I guess that's another way of putting it. So that is a fun how I know you, a little behind the scenes. So when I first met you, I think you had pretty recently moved from Nebraska, right?
Yes. Yep. We've
So
been
tell us a little bit about
here.
that, and tell us actually, give us more of the background. So where you live, your family dynamic, a little bit about that kind of stuff.
Sure, sure. So, yes, we lived in Omaha, Nebraska for many, many years. And while we were living there, my husband actually got a job offer for a company in California. But the trade-off was he can work from home one week and the next week he works in California. So he commuted back and forth to California for like the first 4 years of our first daughter's life while we lived in Omaha. And that's kind of how we got into traveling initially. Is I was able to stay at home with our daughter and we started traveling with him. And then she was like 5 weeks old the first trip that we went on. So we slowly evolved, got into more travel, started writing a blog called Our Next Adventure, where it started as kind of just sharing with friends and family what we were doing because it was very unconventional at this time. Like people didn't work from home or work remotely. Like this was brand new. And so I started that as kind of just sharing our trips and things we were doing. And then it morphed into, as we got a little bit more confident in traveling with a baby and then a toddler, to start sharing tips. And then it became like an actual travel blog. Mm-hmm. And then we got pregnant with our second child, Sophie, and found out when we went in for her 20-week ultrasound, waiting to find out if we were having a boy or girl, and found out instead that she had a rare brain malformation called holoprosencephaly. And so, as I'm sure everybody listening can understand, our world was just completely flipped upside down. Travel had become such a big part of our lives, and now it was felt like something that had to just stop right then and there.
It got ripped away from you along with the dream that you had for, this unborn child. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so it was obviously a very hard time. And then Sophie was born and she was totally fine. Like you wouldn't even know that she had anything wrong with her brain. So it was a real mind F. But
can I imagine? You're like,
But anyway, so to make a long story short, over the years, we just really started, like, I guess like everybody does, you just start figuring out your child and what they need and researching and getting an MD and Dr. Google. And the same thing kind of happened with travel. Like, I originally thought there's no way we're going to be able to do this. And then, I just researched my way into little by little traveling more and more. And then eventually, sorry to go back to the California part, we decided to move back to California. My husband and I had lived here before we had kids for a little bit, but we just found that it was going to be a better long-term environment for Sophie in terms of access to different really specialized types of therapies for her and state services that are available here. And also just so much at our doorstep for travel that we don't have to go so far to get to unique places. So that was kind of part of what led us to California, in addition to my husband's job and no longer having to commute back and forth.
Yeah, that's a win, I guess, right? He can spend his travel time going like fun places. Although I guess going to California from Nebraska probably felt pretty fun for a while.
Yeah, that was pretty fun.
For the first little bit there until it got maybe old.
Then you wanted to see some more new.
Yeah, right. What do you love about travel?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. I've always been such a travel nerd. Like, even when I was in high school, I grew up on a little farm in South Dakota. And so, we never traveled anywhere. But, I would just, study maps. And I watched Rick Steves on PBS. I don't know. I've just always been so fascinated by the way people live in different places and wanting to experience that myself. And then when you have kids, it takes on a whole new meaning because then you feel like you're really sharing that with them and making a global citizen out of, your own kids. And I would say all of our best memories as a family have always been through travel. That's the things that we remember the most. Not that it has to be traveling, of course, but for our family, that's where we really have some amazing moments together.
Yeah. Now that you say that, I think that at least those are the moments that I think are so different than normal life. They stick out in your mind a little bit differently. We talk a lot about, we did a trip to Zion. It would have been maybe it was 2022. So what's that, 3 years ago now? And that particular year, we had a Disney cruise scheduled, but my son, he at that time was undergoing cancer treatment.
Mm.
And you can't really schedule. Like, I mean, they did work with us a little bit. Like they worked with us around going out to Zion, but we had to cancel the cruise. I should say we had to postpone it for a year. And we ended up planning this trip to Zion. And it's still, I think, one of the family's favorite trips. Like we loved it so much. It was such a special time. I think because we also were in such, I don't know, call it hell, like right between surgery and treatment. Like it was just awful.
Just a relief.
And to be somewhere so different, to be together as a family, like it was pretty incredible. So now that you say that, I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. And don't worry, we're going to be talking about some of the travels because I think, everyone listening, whether disabilities are more behavioral based, like kind of stemming from symptoms of autism, more medical, like we're going to talk about it all. And I think talking to Laura before the show, I think her heart is to have people see the possibility in travel and to work past some of the immediate barriers that are so understandable and sometimes hard to get over. And that's why it's nice to partner with people to have help and not to, be stuck inside your own head and your own limitations. So,
yeah, for sure. It's scary. There's so many more decisions you have to make and things you have to consider. And sometimes I think it's just so overwhelming that you don't even want to go down that road. Like on a day-to-day basis, how many decisions are we already making and our brains are spinning constantly? And then you're going to plan a trip somewhere on top of that. Like I think for most of us, like the bandwidth it's hard to find.
Yeah, I found that because I was sharing with you also. So spring break's coming up. We're recording this now in early March, and we really wanted to do something as a family. My husband is a school administrator, so his time off is kind of dictated. Like he only has certain weeks off, to the large degree. And so we wanted to do something, wanted to capitalize on that, especially because I have a 17-year-old who is very busy and it's hard to get him isolated enough to do something as a whole family. And it's like I wanted adventure, but I also knew that I needed also ease in this vacation. Like I knew that I couldn't add something that was going to add a lot of stress for me. For me, that meant a plane flight was probably out just because the added stress that it is for me, because I'm not very well practiced at flying with a family. So we can talk about that. But we ended up renting a motorhome. And we're going to be driving out to the Grand Canyon and doing 2 days there and going to Sedona. So we're all excited about it.
Well, that sounds super fun. And having been to Zion, then you already know, this is something that, we like and enjoy and that we were able to do before. And so.
Yeah, the motorhome for us is a choice out of it's the accessibility of wherever we go, we'll have a home base with us where Levi can be comfortable, where we can have all the things, right? And so, yeah, it feels good. It took a while to settle into I just didn't have peace about any of the ideas that we were brainstorming, but this one feels good. So,
yeah,
I'm excited about it. Okay, but let's talk about. I would love to hear a little bit more about so you became really good at traveling because you practiced a lot, and when you had one child, you added a second child who did have additional needs on the table. So as you kind of look back, what do you observe in terms of kind of maybe the dream that you might have had kind of shifting as you knew that you're going to need to accommodate for Sophie's needs?
Yeah, it's still really hard for me, even now. There's, we just recently went to Hawaii and, we checked into the hotel and Sophie was just exhausted from a day of travel. And Evelyn really wanted to go down to the pool. And it just hurt so much because it's I want our whole family of 4 to be able to go down to the pool right now. We just got to Hawaii, but I couldn't do that because Sophie needed that rest time to recharge. And so I guess that those feelings are never going to go away. It's always going to be hard. Unfortunately, I think it's the same as just the way our daily life is where you have those struggles, but we find ways to adapt. We find ways to make it work. It's unconventional, but I would rather do it the unconventional way than not go at all. And so what that means in practical terms for us has changed a lot. When Sophie was little, it was, making sure that we're staying near a children's hospital, or making sure, like I even went to the steps of having like a letter from her doctor explaining her condition translated into Spanish, like just like anything that would give me peace of mind.
Yeah,
we would do. And then as Sophie got older, then the needs became more behavioral because she also was diagnosed with autism. So, and I don't think I mentioned she uses a wheelchair. So we've had to get into, when she was little, we could carry her. Now we need more accessible places. So it just evolves over time. Like everything with our kids, I feel like you get one thing figured out and then something new happens.
Yes.
So it's not much unlike our regular day-to-day lives. But I think being able to adapt and to also just accept that it's going to be different, it's going to be hard, but it will still 100% be worth it.
Yeah, it's making me think of like, it sounds like you can go in with maybe accurate expectations. So you described this time where you got to Hawaii, everyone's excited. And I'm sure Sophie was excited too, but she was just tired. And you probably would have been able to predict that one of you was going to need to take a break with Sophie rather than go down to the pool. Is that accurate?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, right. And so I feel like you can kind of set yourself up to expect to do that versus be surprised and then maybe resist what the reality is, the needs of your family. And you can tell me if this is accurate, but it sounds like practicing a lot has helped you set up those expectations for what it will look like versus what like you might hope it would look like.
Yeah. And yeah, like you said, setting those expectations for yourself and not holding yourself to a standard of what everybody else is doing. I really struggle with that comparison and like really wanting to get into my head of like, why does it have to be so much harder for us? Which I mean, is 100% true. It is harder for our families like ours, but it doesn't mean we can't do it. We're just doing it differently.
Well, and I think one of the reasons why I want to have this conversation is like, I think that it's like, well, we all know that there's no map for any of us, but I think especially for what travel, like more extensive travel or farther travel looks like, because a lot of people are traveling for medical, they're doing travel, but just not necessarily for leisure. There's no map of like, what does this look like when you have needs X, Y, and Z? Like, there's not a lot of people doing it. And so I think that's what I really enjoy about watching you on your Instagram stories is like you're sharing how you're doing it, and you share, obviously it's Instagram, so you can't share every second, but like you share the times where you're taking a break and you're in the room or vice versa. And so I really appreciate that because I feel like it almost helps me set expectations for myself of what our divide and conquer looks like in terms of how we divide our family to accommodate the different needs of all of our kids. And it's really helpful.
I think you definitely hit the nail on the head that like there's not a lot of representation or like, I think sometimes it just helps to see other people doing it. So it gives you confidence that you can do it. And when you don't see anyone else doing it, it's like, well, maybe we shouldn't be, or maybe this is not worth it. So we try to share, or I try to share everything, the good, the bad. Maybe, I mean, not all the bad, because obviously Sophie is still a kid who deserves to like have that privacy of, when she's having a bad day. But, if there's a time where I have to go sit in the car with her because she needs a time to chill out, then I'll say, well, that didn't work very well. I guess we're going to wait in the car.
I think I'm even remembering, was it Ireland where you guys like got to a dinner and she just it wasn't in the space where she was going to.
Oh, that was in Sonoma. But I mean, that happens just about every trip.
Okay.
To cancel a dinner.
So you think you're going to dinner and it turns out you're not going to dinner because it's just not what you find at some point that Sophie's not going to be able to do that. How do you guys pivot? How do you do that in terms of setting the expectations of your older daughter?
That is really hard. She gets it. Obviously, she's been raising Sophie with us her whole life. It is really disappointing for her, but she also knows that's where the divide and conquer comes in, where, there's things that if we know Sophie can't do something like horseback riding, Matt will stay with Sophie at the hotel and Evelyn and I go horseback riding. Or, in Hawaii, they did a kayaking tour. Matt and Evelyn went and me and Sophie stayed back. So we do have to do that a lot when it comes to pivoting. And this just happened actually in Hawaii. We went to this tiki bar and it was right before our flight home and they had gyoza, which Evelyn loves, gyoza and edamame. And we had to leave because Sophie was so just tired. It was a really long day and we just had to call it. That's another thing, is just knowing when to throw in the towel and not force something.
Mm-hmm.
But she was really upset. And it's like, it's just kind of the reality of this life and what we have to do. Sometimes plans don't work out and we have to leave. But a lot of times we will try to just one of us stay back with Sophie and the other one continue with Evelyn if we can, because, we made it this far. We might as well, at least half of us see it. And my husband and I are a good team in that way of like understanding that we have to split up. Like you said, divide and conquer. That's the best way to put it. To the restaurant comment, though, we are foodies and we love food. So if we have to leave a restaurant, you better believe we are ordering it to go and we are taking it with us. And we're having a picnic in our hotel room because that's what we call it. We're doing a picnic night. And we do a lot of when we travel internationally, especially, we usually don't eat dinner out that much just because we know it's been a busy day. So we've been out all day. Let's just get food and take it back. It doesn't mean we can't have good food or local food. It's just sometimes in the comfort of our hotel room.
And put on softy pants. That sounds great to me.
Exactly.
I'm in. As long as somebody else is making it for me, I'm pretty happy.
Exactly.
It doesn't sound, in terms of kind of back to the sibling dynamic, it doesn't sound all that different than everyday life where we are navigating the challenges and the disappointments of the sibling experience. Yep. And I don't know, I find myself often telling myself to kind of soothe myself that these kids are getting to learn really good skills in terms of learning how to have big feelings, to acknowledge themselves and their needs, to, be sad and mad and all the different things. And so that's how I soothe myself, is thinking that my kids are learning these skills that I didn't learn until I was an adult. And I guess it makes me feel better about doing really hard things.
Yeah. And we have done too, like I've done solo trips where it's just Evelyn and I. And I think I know she really enjoys that time. One, because it's just easier. We don't have to be on Sophie's schedule, which unfortunately we're typically on Sophie's schedule. But then it also gives her that one-on-one time. And it gives me that like desire to travel too. We all kind of get something out of it. So I think if you have a child who you think it would be too much to take them, out of their element, it's not the worst thing in the world. We always say Sophie would probably rather be at home half the time. So if you need to take a solo trip with one of your other kids, that's a great way too to build that bond and to be able to still do the travel that you're longing to do.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of a friend who I know, her adult son now stays back because he wouldn't do well traveling. It wouldn't be a good environment for him. And so there's a lot of mixed feelings, right? Like they have mixed feelings about leaving him, but it's like, really truly recognizing that everybody has needs and wants and desires, and that we try to make space for them all. Is it easy? No. But
is it ideal?
Yes.
Is it that picture perfect family vacation? Maybe not, but I don't know. Half those people are probably faking it too. So
that's right. Probably. Okay. I want to talk more about, so I'm going to go ahead and say it. You're like an expert at travel because of practice, but also because it's where you put your attention, and you have this incredible blog. I messaged you last time. I was like, your blog is so good. Like it's beautiful. It's well written. It's informative. It's like very much serving like our community, and it's lovely. And later on, we're going to talk about a new role you've taken on, which is travel advisor. Is that the right term?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So we're going to talk about that. And we're maybe even going to do like a case study, on air case study, because I pitched an idea to Laura before we started recording about a trip that I want to take. And before we get there, though, let's talk a little bit about, so you talk to people, you see people come to you about travel, and you get to hear like where they get stuck. And so my prediction is a lot of us get stuck really early on in the process, and in a way that we kind of just shut down our dream or our desire.
Yeah.
That we kind of quit before we get started because we can't see ahead to see that how we're going to overcome whatever obstacle we have. So I don't know, maybe let's go through some common issues. And I would love to just get your thoughts on how to stay connected to possibility through each of the issues. How does that sound?
Yeah. Sounds
okay.
Great.
So let's talk about accessibility issues. So you've mentioned Sophie's a wheelchair user and now is grown enough to where you can't necessarily just pick her up everywhere.
Yep.
Levi's way beyond that point. He's almost 300 pounds. So we are not doing any picking up and carrying of him.
Yeah.
So how do you?
Lucky. We are lucky that she's still somewhat small enough that if, we're down in a subway and there's no elevator, we can lift her wheelchair up and out of there. So we realize that gives us a little bit more flexibility. But yeah, accessibility issues are real, even in big cities. Like we were in London last summer and I was like just so surprised for a city of that size, how many subway stations were inaccessible because they didn't have elevators. Otherwise, London was pretty good, I will say. One of the better cities that we've visited. But definitely having accommodations that are accessible is going to be your main thing that's going to hold everything together. I feel like you can always kind of figure out the transportation piece, whether it be buses or walking and that kind of stuff. But having a good hotel that's going to have the space you need, be able to get to different parts of if it's a resort, like getting to the different parts of the resort easily with a wheelchair. That's where having, not to like plug myself, but having a travel advisor can be a really helpful asset to you when you're planning, because those are questions that unfortunately a lot of times you have to just reach out directly to a hotel and ask. Like when we went to Hawaii, I asked them for a map and can they show us what the accessible routes are to the pool and all this stuff. So yeah, it's a big one, but can definitely be navigated. Just requires a lot of attention and a lot of questions.
So I think, and we're going to plug you the whole time. So don't you be shy about plugging you. I want to support and promote your business and people in this community traveling and sparking that joy. So what I hear here is that for people that haven't traveled outside their immediate zone where they're familiar as much, perhaps not even knowing the questions to ask is where people can get stuck, right? Like I wouldn't have thought of contacting the hotel and asking for the accessible routes ahead of time. And so for you, because you've practiced and kind of learned through trial and error, you've learned the better questions or the more helpful questions to ask.
Yeah, for
or
sure.
Even choosing a location, right? So, and I had mentioned before our call, like we were thinking about going to Mexico for spring break. I want to go somewhere warm. I don't like the cold. I know it's very terrible saying that from San Diego. As it was 70
it's been
this
raining
weekend
here, so gosh.
I know. We had one day of rain. And now we're ready to go to Mexico. I was thinking through, I was like, okay, I can't stay at an Airbnb because everywhere we go is traveling outside of like a accessible place. I want to go to a resort, right? So thinking through those kind of things, like I could get that far, but not much further. So having someone like you would kind of help close the gap there. Okay, let's talk about medical needs and kind of how you would point someone to possibility in this regard.
Yeah, so we're lucky that Sophie's health is pretty stable at this point, but there was a time when it wasn't so much. And I would say first and foremost, travel insurance is really important to have, because if you have to cancel your trip because of an illness or something, an issue that you didn't see coming, that's a real fear to put that much money into, a trip that could possibly not happen. There are travel insurance policies that will cover pre-existing conditions. There's just a lot of red tape that you have to kind of be watching out for. But that would be for sure something I would recommend to any family. We've paid out our fair share of travel cancellation policies ourselves. And then just as far as like making sure that you have a good supply of medication, a lot of times if you need prescriptions where you need to get it extra filled, insurance won't do it. Because they say you can get it somewhere else. And it's like, well, it's not that easy.
No, actually, I'm going to tell a quick story just because it's kind of funny. So we went up to see my brother for Christmas. He lives in Reno, Nevada. And we ended up forgetting one of Levi's medications. That's not like a life-sustaining medication. It's a long story. And actually we had thought, let's take a break from this medication and see how it goes. Like when we forgot it, this will be good, right? Well, 2 days into it, we realized that is a very important medication that we definitely didn't realize how much it was doing, and we need it now. Anyhow, so we did all the calls. I found it. I got the prescription transferred. I was rocking and rolling and went to go pick it up at Walmart, and they were very helpful, very kind. And they came back to me with the medication in their hand and said, "Ooh, we're so sorry. this insurance is only accepted in California. And it was because it gets paid for through our secondary insurance, which is Medi-Cal. And so I thought that makes a lot of sense. I didn't think about that until right now, this moment. So thank you for your help. Okay, I guess we won't be getting that medication.
And so, lucky you're right on the border, kids.
Well, we were kind of right on the border. So the next day, at that point, I was like, okay, we're going to just have to deal. We're going to get through it. And my husband's more like, no, I'm going to call around. I'm going to figure this out. And so he found a town, Truckee, California, beautiful little town, that was like 35 minutes from where we were staying, which would have not been a big deal, except for that we had a snowstorm coming. So it actually ended up to be really fun because me and Levi and Dan, my husband, and my mom ended up getting in the minivan, driving up to Truckee on Christmas Eve. And it was really wonderful. Like we got to see the snow, but like not so much. Drive. Yeah, not so much that we were like, oh my gosh, we got to put our chains on. Like we were kind of trying to beat the storm a little bit. Truckee's a gorgeous little town. So we went there. I hopped out to the pharmacy, got it, and got back in the car and turned right around and drove. And it ended up to be quite lovely, but that's my long story of saying, yes, make sure that
adaptability.
There you go. That's a skill there.
Pivoting when necessary.
Pivoting. So anyhow, that's just a story, but medical emergency. So this is where I would ask your insight. So Levi has some pretty critical medical conditions that if they are not so how do I describe this without going into all the detail? He's very stable until he's not. And when he's not stable, he needs medical help and it's, life critical. So what would you suggest for somebody that has that profile?
Well, I mean, I'd probably say you want to stay within the United States so that if you did have something happen and you need to get back home, then that's an option. We've never had to visit the hospital out of the country, but I have heard that getting medical care in Europe is actually not that bad and it's pretty cheap. So you think worst case scenario, if we have to go to the hospital in Spain, at least we know. I do look up where is the best children's hospital in Barcelona or wherever we're at, just so I know in the back of my mind, if we needed to go somewhere, then I would at least know where to go. But I would say it's not necessarily a deal breaker, but I also don't feel like that's such a anxiety inducing situation to be in that I would never say, oh, just go for it. Go to Europe and you'll be fine.
Yeah. Or I had this random idea when you're talking. I was like, oh, well, so our tumor community has a international Facebook group and there's people from Europe and they're clearly getting medical care. So that might be if it was something that we wanted to do, it's certainly not happening soon, that we would be able to perhaps pave a path for going somewhere and feeling like we also had the medical care backup that we needed.
That is a good point. I totally forgot when Sophie was little and part of my, crazy brain trying to wrap my head around how we were going to do this. I made a whole list of every family outside of the US that had Sophie's diagnosis. And I was like, okay, this person's in Ireland, so I can ask them. And this person's in the UK, so I can ask them advice. But yeah, our kids are all
using
over.
The resources that we have, which is this wide network. That's a good idea. Okay. So medical emergency. So just kind of recapping.
I think just in general, having an idea of emergency numbers to call, being in a hotel, obviously, versus an Airbnb is, I think, going to help a lot there. If there is an emergency, you have people on staff that can help you right away. And just knowing where to go, knowing your surroundings goes a long ways. But if that's too much of a risk for your family or your child, then you don't have to. In the US has so many amazing places here. You don't have to leave,
That's the wonderful thing about having a big, vast country. Okay, so let's move on to the next kind of topic or challenge and disruptions to routines. So no matter the way we put it, going outside of your house is going to be a disruption to a routine. So how would you have somebody think about that wants some adventure, but also doesn't know if they can add a whole lot of stress to their already stressful baseline?
Yeah. Oh, that we struggle with this. This is probably our biggest struggle, honestly, when it comes to traveling, because Sophie is such a creature of habit. She loves being at home. She loves going to school, and then she has her schedule, school, therapy, home, whatever. And it really does throw her off. So we're still kind of working through that, to be honest. But I will say that it usually takes her a couple days to adjust. And then after that couple days, she really starts to thrive. And you can see like the wheels turning and she's observing everything. And she's like taking in, the street performers or like children's museum. And like she starts to adjust. It is a challenge and it's always been worth it. Like even just in terms of like growth we've seen in Sophie, like when we come back from a trip, she'll be more verbal. And sometimes she'll have little like behavioral changes, or it really helps her work on her patience. And like this last time, like, gosh, she was a saint for TSA, whereas I was getting really irritated with them. So there are these little like non-measurable things that I feel like she gets out of it too, that makes that disruption of the routine worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like for all the different parts of the family, like for you to be doing the support for her, like outside of the routine, it's almost like you can see how it could reinvigorate the whole family around when you go back to your normal routine. Like you've gotten a break from the routine. And I think it's so like great that you can pinpoint like, oh yeah, a couple days, it is definitely harder and it settles in and it's always been worth it. Almost like a little bit of like a workout, like no pain, no gain.
Yeah, you got to like give yourself a pep talk. Like, okay, the first day's probably going to suck, but then everything's going to get better. This is
what I tell myself about camping as well. Like camping, we like camping as a family. And a lot of times we tent camp. And I tell myself, first night, awful, terrible. Nobody sleeps. It's terrible. But by the second night, everybody's so tired that everyone just goes right to bed. So it actually works out pretty great. Okay, so another common thing, I think, traveling, whether you're going, stateside or internationally, is being exposed to different environments. And that brings up potentials of being treated differently in terms of like, not everybody treats disabled people the same culturally. And so I would love to just hear a bit of like, what have you experienced? And then of course, how would you have people think about, or what advice do you have for people who want to kind of go into new environments, but maybe have some concerns?
Yeah, I think because I'm so motivated myself to go, maybe selfishly too, that I personally don't really think about it that much in terms of what other people are thinking. Or if I am, my biggest thing that I say to myself is we're showing other people what our family looks like, because disabled people, unfortunately, have been kind of put in the shadows for a long time. And I think it's important for us to be out there and kind of push the boundaries, because the world is not an accessible place right now, like just to be frank. And the only way that that's going to change is by being there and showing up and like saying, hey, we have a wheelchair and we can't get down the stairs to get out of this museum. Like they're not going to know that that's an issue unless we show up and are there. So that's kind of the pep talk, I guess, I tell myself when maybe Sophie's being extra loud in a, someplace, and it's like, well, this is our life. Hi. Like we still exist, whether or not you see us or not.
Are there any other areas that you feel like are kind of common things that come up when you talk to other families that you're helping travel, or that you've encountered yourself, that kind of can potentially shut down possibility?
Yeah, so I would say, I think most people's fear is that they're going to be looked at as different. But honestly, we get a lot of compliments, like, it's so good to see you doing this. Or like, they love to see Sophie at the pool. They can see how happy she is. Again, it just increases your visibility in the world, which is a great thing, I think, in general, for kind of moving towards a more inclusive society. But we always get lots of offers to help with things. When we're carrying Sophie's wheelchair up the stairs in the subway, there's like 10 people who are like, can we help you? Can we help you? Like, I think people generally are more wanting to help and caring and happy to see you out and about than they are judging you, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, I feel like as you're describing this, I can't put my finger on it, but I'm thinking of an experience that we had with Levi that I think it's like, it's moving when you step outside your own typical environment and you see the nature of people, and the nature of people being beautiful and welcoming and generous. That just feels good, and that's just, I think, one of the perks of traveling is you get to expose yourself to different things that like stick out to you differently. So much good stuff. So I want to talk about your role as a travel advisor. I don't know that it was a term that's like, I know exactly what it was. I know a little bit more now because like I've studied your website. But we're going to save people that time. So why don't we start with like, what does a travel advisor do?
Yeah. So I think most people, when they hear the term travel advisor, they're more so thinking of like a travel agent, like an old lady behind a desk, sending you to some Cancun resort. Yeah. Smoking a cigarette, sending you some, cookie cutter resort in Cancun. But a modern travel advisor is very different. And it is has evolved over the last, I would say like 10 years or so, I think, to where my goal is to really be more of a guide and a mentor through the whole process, like not just booking you a hotel, but also like planning your entire itinerary. So, everything from where you're going to stay to how you're going to get there, what activities you're going to do, how you're going to make it work, especially for special needs families with, maybe there's something one child wants to do, but your special needs child can't do that. Or maybe there's something that your special needs child really wants to do that, finding a balance and something that everybody can enjoy, I think, like you had mentioned. And so putting it all together then in an itinerary that's seamless. So it takes all the guesswork out of it for you, and you don't have to do hours and hours of research and ask all the questions, because I'll do that for you and really just give you the confidence that like, okay, here's a full package itinerary day by day. And you can have the confidence to go out and know that like, okay, this is going to be an accessible place to go. And this isn't going to be too loud, or, this place is going to have a kids menu, just all those little details that become overwhelming. I can handle those for you.
Well, I think that's the thing. Yes, I think it becomes overwhelming so quickly. And for most people, this is certainly not all, but I think most people, the women or wives, take on the role of travel planner in addition to everything else they're doing. And I think also like they're the ones that need the rest the most. And so
yeah, exactly.
Giving yourself like support is something I'm always after. And it feels like a why not? I mean, obviously there's some expense involved. So why don't you share with people the different levels of support that you provide, just so people can kind of get their brains going and how they might consider working with you?
Yeah. So it really depends on like how much help you want or how confident you feel. Because if you feel like you can do part of the pieces yourself and you just need help like finding a destination or finding a hotel, then it can be as simple as me doing that legwork for you. Or if, like I said, if you just want somebody to do all of it because you're already making a million decisions every day, then even better, we can do that too. So there's 3 different levels. There's basically like a full service VIP, where we just do everything from start to finish. There's kind of an intermediate level where, I'll handle the bones of the trip, like, where you're going to stay and any like formal tours that we want to book or things like that. And then there's just booking your hotels, which for booking hotels, it doesn't cost any more to work with a travel advisor. And actually, it's great for you because hotels want to really wow clients that come through with travel agents. So they will give extra little perks like free breakfast and room upgrades and resort credits, things like that to travel advisor clients. So it doesn't cost you any more to work with a travel advisor, and then you get some free stuff out of the deal. And I'll also handle the logistics of making sure that you have an accessible room and that you know how to navigate the property, all that fun stuff. And did you know that just because you book an accessible room does not mean you necessarily are guaranteed one? I found that out recently.
You're like, I found that out the hard way. I did not know that.
So, yeah.
Optional.
Having a travel advisor to confirm all of those details for you can be helpful.
Yeah. And to be the louder person that gets the accessible room.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is where I alluded to earlier. I was like, we're going to do a real case study right before your eyes, ladies and gentlemen, because I was telling Laura this morning. So Levi leaves for school late on Tuesdays. The bus comes late. And we were having a very leisurely morning, drinking our coffee together. We missed the bus. That was unfortunate because we were so relaxed. But we were talking about his birthday. His birthday is coming up in May, so it's still a little bit off, but it's his 16th birthday. And Dan, my husband, and I were talking about how we want to honor him for his 16th birthday, because it's funny, even every time I talk about it, like I just feel that well of emotion because I'm seeing all of his peers, that he's grown up with, get their permit and their license. And I think 16 is a really pivotal birthday that a lot of people are launching into more independence. And that is not Levi's experience. If anything, he's being more constricted by not having the support that he needs to have any independence. So I'm expecting it to have a lot of thoughts and feelings. So we wanted to plan something for him, and we had a couple ideas that he shut down. He did not like them, but we did come up with the idea of a staycation. And so what I know so far is that I would want an extraordinary pool, and it's also Mother's Day weekend. His birthday is the day after Mother's Day this year. So what more like would you want from me so that you could then go plan an extraordinary weekend?
So doing a staycation, I guess my first question would be, how far do you want to go? Do you want it to be in San Diego or just in Southern California? What's your like max radius?
I asked him, and because I was saying maybe Orange County, his answer was San Diego. But I also think he might be like answering from like what he knows. So I would say the max radius is 2-hour drive.
Yeah. Well, you're lucky in the fact that you live in Southern California and there's 1,000,001 beautiful hotels with amazing pools. So I don't think you have any shortage of options there.
Well, let's see, then actually this is where I hit my overwhelm. Because I'm like, there's so many
options.
How do I choose? Mm-hmm. So how does this, like, if I was saying, okay, go book something, how does it go?
What I do with new clients, or when we're first kind of figuring out, if, what you might be interested in or what kind of trip you're thinking of, is we do a discovery call. Mm-hmm. So I kind of have a checklist. There's an intake form. Sorry. Going back, an intake form that you would fill out that just kind of talks about like, what's your general travel style? What you're looking for? What is your vision for the trip, or what do you envision doing? And then kind of work back from there. So I like, they call it destination matchmaking, which is like the most fun idea to me, is really just like, okay, what vibe do you want? And then how can we match it? So that's kind of where I like to start. Mm-hmm. And then obviously like, do you want to do other activities in between, or do you want to just stay at a hotel and, chill out there, which is totally amazing in itself. What kind of, like, do you want to be go, go, go? Do you want to be more laid back? Do you want to add spa services at the hotel to, really maximize the property there? Or does it not really matter to you? Do you just want a nice pool and, that's it? So kind of just going through what your vision is, like I said, and finding a good property that would match the vibe. Yeah.
I think this could be really fun to really involve Levi in it, because I feel like my answers might be very different, but I love the idea of him being able to like, I think he would do very well with a menu. Like, okay, do you want a city vibe, or do you want country vibe, or like whatever the different would be. But I feel like that would be a really great way of honoring him. Okay. Well, we'll have to do that discovery call.
Chat with Levi.
Yeah, I was like, and he'll be fun. He'll be fun. Everyone loves him so much. Okay, so that's how it starts. So I think, yes, we are doing all the promotion to, of course, promote your business, but also to promote this community traveling. And, I hear from so many moms who are at the point where they just feel like they've had to say no to their dreams. And I feel like this is a very small way of picking back up some of them. To your point, like maybe you don't start with traveling abroad with the whole family. Maybe you start with something close with the whole family. Maybe you travel abroad with just a portion of your family, and really kind of think outside the box. And I think that's, really what this special needs life requires, whether it's travel or not.
Well, and I like the idea of you doing the staycation, because I think even just getting out of your normal day-to-day routine and just being somewhere different is enough to really give you that like re-energizing that we need as special needs moms, because it can feel so mundane having that routine over and over and over again, and it starts to feel like you're trapped. And so for me, travel is like a way to break out of that, even if momentarily, and then we go back to the routine, but it just kind of reinvigorates our family, like you said. But you can start small. You don't have to go do something humongous, Just get your feet wet, get your confidence, and then it kind of snowballs from there.
That's what I was thinking about, with my own personal family is like, okay, we need to start practicing flying, because like starting to fly places, because I do want to do more travel, but because I travel so infrequently, That it's like, it's always new. It's always kind of new, right? Like, because it's like, I only fly somewhere once in a while. So I want to get better at that because also like this summer, I'm very likely taking Levi to Georgia to a camp, and I'm going to stay out there because medically, I'm not leaving him there.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
That's fair.
Even though he'll be supported by medical staff there. It's too much too soon. But yeah. So anyhow, okay. Well, I'm excited. I'm really excited, and I'm so happy to have this conversation. Any last closing words that you have on your mind before we do wrap up this episode?
I guess I would just say it's never going to be perfect. It's always travel, that is. Whether you have a special needs child or not, it's always a little messy. You're always going to have challenges and you have to pivot. And so I think just being able to really embrace that, I would say go with the flow, but that sounds a little cheesy, but just being able to embrace that it's going to be messy and, there is going to be challenges, but it's going to be worth it. And at the same time, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I've had people that say like, oh, I don't want to waste your time. Like, you're never wasting my time. I love talking about travel. I am a complete nerd. I plan trips that I don't even take because it's just fun for me. So you're not wasting my time at all. We can always do like a quick call. Just kind of tell me what you're thinking and we can see if we can make it work. And if it doesn't right now, or, if you want to go a different direction, that's fine too.
Yeah. I love it. So ladies, the offer is on the table. You have this gold mine of a resource who's not just knowledgeable and brilliant, but generous and kind and, just an amazing resource. So thank you so much for sharing your life, who you are, and of course your passion here at the Special Needs Mom podcast.
It's been fun. Thanks.
Yeah.